This is going to be about how to add sprites to your player fixture, and also there's going to be a bit about Texture Packer as well. So you should have already downloaded Texture Packer. If you haven't, you can go back and follow the steps. The link is also on the site. So the one thing you should know about Texture Packer is that when you find your sprites, you should make sure that they don't have any white background. Otherwise, that's going to be, or like even any colored background, because that's going to be a bit of a problem when you try to render it. After that, when you make your sprites, you'll generate a sprite PNG and an atlas. So the sprite PNG would look something like this. I'm making a Mario game, so it looks like this. It's got all your little figures in a line, and also it should generate an atlas file which has the name of the image and also the different like smaller images that you use to make them. So in this case I have Big Mario, Fireballs, Goombas, Little Mario, all defined in different sections, and that makes it easier for your code to reference them later on. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, to start adding sprites to your game, you want to first go to your constants and make sure you have your atlas file name and your each individual character or type of image that was in your atlas written down as constants variables. So I've only put Little Mario here because that's the only one I'll use in this tutorial, but eventually you want to have Big Mario, Fireball, Goomba, all these also written down as a constant, just to make it easier to reference. Now, then, after that, you should go to your game, so your main game class, the one that extends game, and you want to make sure that your sprite batch is privated, and also you have this method, get batch. This will help you out later on. Okay, so now in your screen class, mine is called level 1, you want to make a texture or private texture atlas called atlas, and this will reference this file, and it will be able to kind of reference all the different areas where your images are stored in your PNG. Now under here you want to also initialize it, so atlas equals new texture atlas, and you want to pass in the constants variable that is your atlas name, so atlas file name, and that. Alright. You also want to make a getter method for this, so get atlas, I'm just going to auto generate it. And the last thing in this screen class is you want to add you want to pass in the screen class into your player. So since the player is defined within a screen class already, because this implements screen as seen here, you can just pass in the keyword this, and it'll pass in the entire game screen. Right now it's red because we haven't changed it in the player. So in your player class, first you want to add in a screen. Mine's called level 1, yours might be called screen or my screen or something like that, game screen, I don't know, but yeah, I'm going to call it screen, and that's done there, and it should relieve this problem in your game screen. Now, the variables you need in the player class are a texture region, and the texture region is it's essentially the image of your player sprite, and in this case this is the texture region specifically for the player when they're not moving and just standing around, so the idle state, that's why it's called the player idle texture. Eventually, when you're animating it, you want to have different different images when the character is running or jumping or falling or dying. Like all these need to be handled. All these different states need to be handled, and so we can do it using an enum. So you want to make a private enum and call it state. Then you want to add in all your different states. You can add them now. It'll just be like standing, running, something like that. But for now, I just have standing as the main one because that's the one we're going to use. States are basically like just strings to represent different things in your game. It's kind of like a variable, each individual variables. So for the current state, we want to also track what state the player is currently in, and that's what this state variable is for. And we also want a boolean to track if the player is moving to the right. If they're not moving to the right, then they'll be moving to the left, and that's how we can flip the images of their running and standing animations. Okay, so to initialize these, you want to, since the player extends a sprite, you want to call super screen.getAtlas.find region constants, and you want to pass in your constants and your player string name. So mine's called Little Mario strings. Yours might be called something different if you're not making Mario. Alright, so then, additionally, you want to pass in the width and height of your, oh no, that's not here, sorry. This is fine. This is what you need for your super. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is add a, want to initialize your other variables. So texture region, we'll do player idle texture equals new texture region, and you want to pass in screen.getAtlas find region, and you'll find the region that is constants Little Mario string. And for this one, you want to define where it starts. So 0, 0 is the starting coordinates, and also the width and the height, which is 16 by 16, because that's how tall our thing is. So we can do it like this to make it more readable. Then you want to add in your current state, which is equal to standing, because that's the only one we'll be using this time. And you want to also add in running to the right equals true. Now, after that, it's time to set the bounds. So this will kind of restrict your image to stay in a particular area and not like get stretched or like spawn your image in a weird way that's not attached to your fixture. So for this, you want to set bounds to x, y, and your width and height. Then you also want to set the region. So set region with the texture that's like relevant. So player idle texture. After that, you want to start, you don't have to really animate in this video, but you want to add in a method called getFrame. I've just copy and pasted it. You can pause it if you want. I will explain it, which will return the current frame the player is on, so that to your draw method. So your draw method can essentially like call it and update every second that your player moves. So you want to pass in a delta time as well. Get state currently doesn't exist because because it's a method we'll make later, but you want to have your current state and you want to track that state, and then depending on the current state you'll return a different image. So for now we only have standing, and we want to return the player idle texture when it's in the standing state. A switch statement is essentially like a neater if statement. It'll take a condition, which is the current state, and if the current state is standing, it'll execute some lines of code. So do whatever there is. But it also has a default state, or default condition, which is essentially like the else statement. If none of the other states match, then do this. And for now, we want to set the default to player idle texture because that's the only texture we have. Another interesting thing about switch statements is that you need to add a break after your case. So normally you would have something like this, but in the case of standing, it's going to be the same as what's going to happen in default. So you can remove the break, and in the case of standing, it'll continue to run the next lines of code until it gets to here, and until it gets to the break, and then it'll stop. So for each case, you need to have a break. That's how the switch works. So the next thing you want to do is check if your player is moving to the left or right, and flip the image accordingly. So this line essentially checks if your velocity is less than 0. So if it's less than 0, that means you're moving to the left, or if you're not currently running to the right, then you must be running to the left. So it's if your velocity is moving to the left, or you are running to the left, and if the current texture region isn't already flipped, then you can flip the image. So region.flip essentially just flips it around the x-axis, and doesn't do anything around the y-axis if we set it to false. And you also want to set running to right equals to false because you're moving to the left. On the other hand, you have box2d body moving to the right, and if it is flipped already, then you want to flip it the other way. So it's essentially the opposite of the first one. After that, you want to return the region. And that's it for now for getFrame. The next thing you need to do is create the getState method. So getState. Private, let's see, or public state getState. And you can just return, for now, return just state.standing. And this will be changed a lot later on when we animate, but for now this is enough. The final thing is to create an update method that will update every time your frame, like you move your player, so I'll redraw the new texture. Void update float delta time. This will be called in the screen method, which is why we have a delta time. So set position to box2dbody.getPosition.x minus get width. So essentially, the box2d body, if there's a rectangle, it'll call the top corner, so the top right corner. So that's why you have to do subtract it by half the width for the x value, and also do the same for the y value. Oops. Make sure you change it to get height instead of get width for the second one, and change this to y as well. After that, you want to set the region to get frame and delta time. So, alright, and then you should call the player's update method in your screen method. So that would be here. You can add it player dot update delta time, or in this case it's called dt. And you also want to render your sprite, so you should call player dot draw your game. This game variable is called my game, or this screen's variable is called my game. Then get batch. Okay, and after that, if we run it, we should be able to see our little sprite. Yep, there's Mario. He doesn't walk yet, but he at least flips around, so that's pretty cool. Alright.